Hey, this is Jonathan Ariel. I'm back with another video in the series on how to create a Moodle course. Now, in the previous video, we learned a lot about how to write questions in Moodle. And so now it's time to create a quiz assignment. Once again, it's not immediately apparent how you would do that on this screen without editing being turned on. So I have to go up here to the Actions menu and turn editing on. So scroll down a little bit. I'm going to add an activity. And from the list, I'm going to choose Quiz. So just like writing a question, there's a lot of settings for a quiz. Moodle is seriously superpowered. Sometimes it looks like a bunch of text on the screen and it looks like a website that came out of the 1990s. But it hides all of its superpowers and they usually show up in these deeply detailed menus. But quick heads up, I'll show you when we're done how to create a copy of a quiz so you can make a duplicate without having to go in and make every single one of these settings again. So for the first setting, that's the quiz name. And unlike a quiz question, the name that you type in here will totally be visible to students. It's what they'll click on from the main screen to take the quiz. And so I'm going to call this the Unit 1 Notes Quiz. Now in the description, that'll show up after a student has started the quiz, but before they get to see the actual questions. So I might type in something like, take this quiz after completing the notes for Unit 1. That's enough for now. Let me come down to the next set of options for timing. Now, if I wanted to, I could set a start date for this quiz. Like, let's say I want to go in and make it start on July the 6th, and I want it to start at 8 o'clock in the morning. Then I can close the quiz, kind of like a due date. I can make that close on the following Friday, and I want it to close at 3 o'clock p.m., but notice I have to choose 15 from the list, because on your end as a teacher, Moodle is going to show you 24-hour time. For students, it'll display as 12-hour time with an AM and PM. Now for the time limit, the default is not to enable a time limit, but there's situations where you'd want to put a time limit on a quiz, like say you might want to give kids 30 minutes to take a quiz before it turns itself in automatically. Now these two date settings and then the time limit, if you were in a situation where a student became sick and you wanted them to have a different due date, well, after the quiz is created, you can make an override and change that student's due date while keeping the rest of the class the same. You could also go into that student and change their time limit. Maybe that student has accommodations so that they get twice as much time for a quiz, and so you could make that change on a user override. So for now, I'm going to actually change that time limit to not enable it. Now the next setting says when time expires, open attempts are submitted automatically. I recommend you leave that the way it's set because many times a student will take a quiz 2 or 3 times and on their last attempt, they'll know that they have a really good grade. And somewhere in that, they'll forget to actually submit the quiz. And you'll go back and on first glance, the grade that will show up is their highest official grade, but it's pretty terrible because they didn't turn in their actual highest grade. Now, you're going to be able to go into Moodle behind the scenes and check and see that they really were going to make a better grade, but that's a lot of work. And so the faster way is to leave this set on open attempts are submitted automatically. So let's scroll down for a few more options. For grade, let's open that up. For the grade category, we don't have any choices here because we haven't set up the gradebook to have any categories. We'll come back later. You could set up a Unit 1 and a Unit 2 category in the gradebook, but I'll save that for a different video. Now for grade to pass, you don't have to type anything in this box, but if I type a 70 into this box, then when I do look at the gradebook later and I see all of the results of the quiz, then any grade that's 70 or better will show up as green, and any grade that's below this number will show up in red. It's a nice visual effect. For the attempts allowed, unlimited is the default, but you could choose any number between 1 and 10. I started using Moodle about 8 years ago, and I let every single one of my quizzes be set on unlimited. And that was okay to start, but over the years I found that students actually took way too many attempts. It actually was counterproductive. Students would miss the first question on a quiz and they would immediately go back and start a new attempt. And so they would end up taking 10 or 15 tries just to make a perfect score. And so a couple of years ago, I experimented with setting that setting to 5 for most of the quizzes in my course. So students still get several attempts to make a high grade, but limiting their number of attempts slightly just makes them take every attempt a little more seriously. You could experiment with that setting with your own class if you want to. Now for grading method, the default is set on highest grade. That means a student might take a quiz 3 times, and on first glance, when they or you look at the gradebook, they're going to see their highest grade only. Now you and the student could both look further back into Moodle and see all of the grades for every single attempt that they made. And for most cases, you just want to leave this set as highest grade, unless you come up with a reason why you want to change it. Now, let me point out 2 things that don't actually have to do with the quiz, but they have to do with Moodle, and I realize I haven't mentioned them up to this point. If you see the small blue question mark right here, I can click that and get a very small help menu that kind of explains what this setting is all about. And if that's not enough, I could scroll down to the very bottom of the page and click on Moodle Docs for this page. I'm going to open this in a new tab. So let's go look at that. So this is the Moodle Docs website that I linked in a previous video. But now your personal Moodle course is directing you to the particular help page that deals with the page you're trying to figure out in your Moodle. So for example, we were just on the grade section of the quiz, and I can click on it here, and that's going to lead me through a detailed explanation of everything that appears as a setting on this page. I'm not going to go through every single thing in here, but it's always on every single Moodle page, and it just helps you find what you need to know. So let's go back to Moodle. So we were in the grade section, but I think we're done. And let's go to layout. Now the default says that the layout is a new page for every 5 questions. Now you can change this to be any of the settings in the box, but be aware that if you choose all questions on one page, that could make your quiz attempt, it could make the page really long and difficult to navigate, and it would take longer for a student's internet to load that quiz attempt. So it's better to group up questions on a page. However, if you choose 1 question per page, that's pretty tedious because a student is going to have to load a new page every time they want to see a new question. So play around with it. If I had a quiz with 6 questions, I would totally choose 3 questions on every page. For now, I'll leave it at 5. This is also a setting. If you don't know how many questions are actually going to be on the quiz, you can always come back to the quiz settings and make a change. Now under Show More, the navigation method is set to be free. And what that means is if you have 2 pages worth of questions, for free, if you're on the 2nd page, you can go back to the 1st. But if you make a change and say sequential, then when a student reaches the 2nd page, they can no longer go back to the 1st. I recommend leaving it on free unless you want to experiment with sequential. So let's close that section and open up question behavior. Now, shuffle within questions sounds like something that happened on a quiz question that we wrote earlier. If you wrote a quiz question and said, yes, it's okay for the answer choices to be shuffled, and you leave it as a yes on the quiz, well then that question will shuffle. Understand that you could put a no right here, and then no matter how you wrote the question, it's not going to shuffle the answer choices on the quiz. I'll leave this back set on yes. Now for how questions behave, adaptive mode is the default, and that's the method I've displayed along the way with sample questions that you've seen. It gives students multiple tries at a question, and it takes away a fraction of those points for every incorrect answer. Now there are other question behaviors, and you can experiment with these. Pretty much the exact opposite would be deferred feedback, and you would choose that setting if you wanted the quiz to behave more like a traditional paper and pencil quiz, where a student has to turn the entire thing in before they get any feedback about how they've done. So I'm going to leave that on adaptive mode for now. So let's close that. Then we'll skip a couple of options and come down to extra restrictions on attempts. So you can require a password for a student to take a quiz. I mentioned in a previous video that one of the quizzes in a unit for my class will count as a test grade. But students have to show me the quiz on screen and I type in the password and then they can start the quiz. So I kind of know that they're taking that quiz and I keep an extra close eye on them. So I'm going to leave that blank for now. Another option is to enable a time delay between quiz attempts. If you want students to kind of have to take a cooling off period, it can help deal with situations where kids actually stress out because they think they have to have a perfect grade right now, and they'll burn through 5 or 10 quiz attempts and get super frustrated about it. It can be helpful to force them to put the brakes on a little bit. For now, I'm going to leave that unchecked. Now, in overall feedback, this is a message that will show up kind of generally after the quiz is complete. We've had question feedback before, and this is quiz feedback. So I might want to have a message that says, "Congratulations, you made an A." And I only want that to show up for grades that are actually an A. So I'll put 89.5 in the grade boundary. So any grades that round up to an A or are already an A will get this message. Then I want a different message for "Good job, you passed." And then I need one more feedback field, so I'll have to add some here. All right, so I want that message to show up for a passing grade, so the boundary is going to be 69.5. And then for any grade below that, that would be failing. So I'll type a message something like, "You should attempt this quiz again. Ask your teacher for help if needed." Now, I definitely recommend you lean towards the positive on feedback on Moodle. In a real class situation, you could get away with a little bit of a negative tone because students can usually tell that you really just have their best interest in mind and you're just trying to help them improve. But on Moodle, if this is the only interaction a student has with you at that particular moment, like they're at home taking the quiz, you definitely don't want to take that negative tone in Moodle. So at this point, we could set up more boundaries and more different kinds of feedback, but for now I can leave them blank, and Moodle knows that the bottom boundary is going to be 0%. Let's open up Common Module Settings. And right now the availability is set to show, and we really want to change that to hide. Right now this quiz doesn't have any questions assigned to it, so if we complete this page and save the quiz, it would show up on the unit, and if that unit was open, students could then take the quiz and understand that they could make 100 without having to answer any questions. So until the quiz is ready, it needs to be hidden. So let's close that up. All right, so that's all the changes. Let's save and display. So this takes us to the start of the quiz. And you can see right here, this is the quiz text that we put in to show up before the questions themselves. Now, notice right here, this error message in kind of a pink tone, that's Moodle trying to tell us that there's a problem that we need to deal with right now. And it says that no questions have been added yet. Well, if you remember your homework from a previous video, that was to write some sample questions into some categories that you set up in Moodle. Now this video is stretched on long enough, so in the following video, I'll show you how to take those questions and assign them to a Moodle quiz. For now, thanks for watching.